It's ironic. That song and this passage work so well. It's kind of like there's a God who does stuff. But speaking of the God who does stuff, we are in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. This is admittedly part of a longer passage that should at least go down to 24. But knowing what is here and what is also in the rest of that, there is no way that I can feel even remotely okay if I tried to cover all of that, because either we're going to be here until Sunday night and then just roll right over into service, or I'm just going to have to leave way too much on the table. So we're going to break it up into smaller chunks. But this is, in the larger part of the passage, where we get the term Antichrist. And it is simply that which is against Christ, both in its plural and its singular form. It is here, not Revelation, that the term shows up. So you can borrow, because it's all Johannine, that's my attempt at sounding smart, literature, because he writes Revelation as well. But here, this morning, we're going to look at a very specific command. And it's not to love, which is great when I just take that phrase and not the rest of it. I had thought, after I had named the thing, because coming up with a title is always the hardest part of putting a sermon together for me, to be honest with you. But as I was thinking about it, I thought, man, that's going to be great, because they know my proclivity of anti-Valentine's Day. But this is not that sermon. This is actually more about who's going to be your Valentine, I guess. But that seemed like a really wordy title that would have taken up too much room. So we went with Don't Love. But here's the passage. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15, 16, and 17. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away, and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God lives forever. Yeah. Father God, help us to understand as we look at this passage, partially in preparation for even next week, as we look at how not to be a part of the Antichrist's stuff. Help us to realize what it is that we need to stay away from. Help us to realize why it is that we need to stay away from that. And help us to realize, as a result of that, even more so who you are, and how magnificent you are, and how different you are, and how other you are, and help us to draw close to you, not just simply draw away from something else. And in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. So we're going to take a fun little approach. We're going to do 15 and 17, and then we're going to come back to 16. And the reason we're going to do this is because 15 and 17 have your why, and then your 16, verse 16, has an explanation of what the world is. And I want to spend the balance of my time kind of fleshing out, because sometimes we tell people, don't love the world. And then they go, but I live in the world. What does that even mean? So 16 is going to define for us what we're not going to love. But before we get to what we're not going to love, there's some really good reasons not to love it. And if I did it the other way, I'm going to run out of time. This is the best use of, because I like the verse 16. But, so first, we're commanded, do not love the world nor the things in the world, because if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Meaning that if we find that when we have the choice between the kingdom of this earth, and we find the temporal stuff, and we find that our sin nature is more appealing to us than the things of God, and we find that we, by default, and by desire, more so, continue to do those things which we know are against the will of the Father, it is a really good litmus test and should be a red flag for us to go, hold on, wait a minute. If I really loved God, then I would love the things of God. And I would do the things of God, not I would come over here. Right? It's kind of like, if you will allow me to have the analogy, if you have the person who is married and has a girlfriend on the side, or a boyfriend on the side, depending on which way you want the gender of the individual to go. Or, hey, we're in the 21st century. I'm not okaying that, by the way. I'm just realizing that if you're going to be a sinner, you're a sinner. But in that scheme of things, so you're married to your spouse, and if I love my spouse, then I go with my spouse. I do the things for my spouse. I make my spouse happy. I might suck up the fact that it's Valentine's Day, and as much as I hate commercialism, I'll still love on my wife. All for a greeting card company. There you go. But if I don't love my wife, then I might find myself saying, well, but this other one makes me just as happy, and it's okay. I can split my time between the two of you, right? Nobody here is going to be like, yeah, my spouse can have another side person, right? I mean, if you find that out, you're going to have a long discussion with your spouse, right? And if you don't have a long discussion with your spouse, we need to have a long discussion. Okay? Because this is what we find is all kinds of people sitting in church going, well, yeah, I'm with God, but I really like my sin. Oh, we cuddle. This is the problem. The analogy got weird for a second because I was like, they're small ears. So you'll just have to let me have it on a PG level. But in the process of things, this is what John is saying, no, this doesn't happen. Either you're with God and you love the things of God, or you're against God, which is what he's going to use the term antichrist in a plural sense. And that's what he's getting at. There are those who are just against Christ. If you're not with him, then you are an antichrist. Isn't that really warm and fuzzy for you? Right there. That's the term John is going to lay down. So if I find myself, as I live my life, going, I like the things that are more of the world, and we're going to define that in some good, clear terms in a second, then that's a litmus test. It's a red flag for me to go, oh, wait, do I know God? I need to make sure that this is right. Because either my relationship has gone really wonky, or I don't have a relationship. So first, I shouldn't love the things of the world, because if I do, it's the indicator that I don't love God. Because I can't love both. Right? If you remember, if you've watched, the Dr. Phil show, and if you do, you should stop that. Or whatever, or you just go to the office and you hear the guy who's talking or the girl who's talking of, well, yeah, I've got my spouse, but I've also, and I don't know which one I want to go with. And the spouse is like waiting for them to make up the decision. I've never understood that one. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to wait. Just so we're clear, that'll be that. Your non-decision is a decision. Your previous decision is also a decision. Like they're just, sorry, we're going to travel down that bus trail if we're not real careful, and that's just crazy. But, either you are in love with God or you're not. And if you find that you do the things that you know aren't about Him, then congratulations, you don't love God. This is what John is saying. Either you are in or you are not. It's not like, it is. It's kind of like, because now I'm going to work it in. It's kind of like if you go to college, you know if you're in college. Unless, of course, you're Joe and they call you up and say, hey, you're enrolled and you're missing some stuff. What? There were paperworks and stuff that I should sign. You don't just discover, you're married if you're married. You're not married if you're not married. Mm-hmm. There are indications. Loving the world is the indication that you're not married to God. But also, here's a practical one. The world is passing away, and everything with it. So the dichotomy is the things of God, because God is eternal, God's stuff is eternal. The things you do for God are eternal. The stuff you do here passes away when the world passes away. I mean, you can build a big building. You can slap your name on it. But how many, because now I'm on the college thing, how many college campuses have you walked by and realized, like, oh, there's Rish Hall. Well, who's Rish? Who cares? Nobody. Who cares why, we slap stuff all the time and we, oh, look, that's going to be, and in a generation, at best, nobody knows who that is. Think about how many Fortune 500 companies have lasted, 50 years. Past the guy who, these things just all are temporal. They all go away. Build a big house. Great. If that's your thing, just realize that in a few generations, your big house isn't going to be so big. 100 years from now, I bet your big house isn't even there. Somebody's going to plow it down and create something else. Somebody's going to decide that your huge farm field would be a great subdivision, which is tragic. But these are the things that we know. The world passes away. And if that's what we're putting into all of our efforts, then Jesus has something to say. That whole moth and rust, time corrupts thing. Or you invest it in the things of God, into the kingdom that is eternal, that has no beginning and has no end. So, where do you really want your effort to land? Oddly, most of humanity chooses the short run. I don't understand that. Well, I do, but I don't like to understand it. But this is where we fall. We fall on the short run of things. And we find that people love the world for whatever reason, because there's this, it's now. I can tangibly touch it. And we're going to define that even more so narrowly in a minute. But this is what it's getting at. John is saying, if you love the world, and we're about to define what we mean by that in very concrete ways, then you don't love God. It is a black and white thing for him. Now remember, though, on that is the last week we have looked at how there was John admitting and giving us, there is a certain bit of growth that's coming. So if you find yourself loving God, but still kind of flirting with the idea, okay, mature, grow up in your faith. I understand some of you have just gotten saved, and that's not exactly the quote, but this is what John is getting at. He's using those of you who are just born, speaking in a spiritual sense. Just like newborn babies don't get up and run around the room. It takes them a few months before they start doing jumping jacks, before they start talking, before they start eating solid food. Same with Christianity. There's a growth process. But at the same time, if what you find is that you live over here and everything you want and every desire of your heart is just the world, then it's the litmus that should make you go, oh, I'm not over here. There is something actual wonky about the whole thing. So now, verse 16, where we will land and land with great vengeance. Because this is the helpful end for me. Because it's one thing, I think we all kind of know, we need to avoid the world. That's bad. But what does that mean? Because if we just leave it at that, then, when I leave here and I go eat, that's food's of the world. Should I not eat? God forbid. Right? I mean, because we know my sin of choice is gluttony. Because my favorite food is buffet. That's why I like Sunday night so much. But in the course of things, what is it that we're supposed to avoid? And John gives us that information. for all that is in the world. And now he gives us three broad categories: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. Now here's the problem. Most of the time when these are defined, they are defined so narrowly that it's a sermon that you should give to junior high boys. Because it's, the lust of the flesh, we all know what that is. Well, it's actually much broader than that. Because in this case, the lust of the flesh, and flesh, just to nerd out a little bit, sarx, which is the Greek word, is not meant to limit it down to just physical pleasure, such as gluttony or adultery or that sort of a thing. The word is being used here in juxtaposition, my nerd word, I've used that word several times this morning already, but anyways, as in opposition to the notion of the Spirit, the things of God. So the lust of the flesh is not just the pursuit of physical pleasure, but it is all of those things that you just crave as the non-spiritual side of things. So anything that's not your spirit, or rather the Spirit of God craving, desire, then that's the lust of the flesh. So that which isn't God, whatever it is, falls into that category. That's a much broader category. So for instance, when I begin to desire an ease of life, and I'm willing to, I'll be a little dishonest, because this gets me a little bit ahead. I'll sell what I do a little bit on the edge. This product will turn your hair back from being gray. Well, I mean, it's charcoal, so I guess it would, sort of. But if I cleverly word things, then it works out for me. Right? 99% of people are happy with this product. Because, I've sold it to 10 people and 9 of them liked it. I mean, granted, those 9 were my family members, but that's not the point. We can do this, and it's the things that we just naturally desire. Right? If you'll remember over in Galatians, Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Which requires me, because I learned those in a song, and so I always want to sing the song. So self-control comes in for me not to sing the song. You don't want me to sing the song because it's a really silly song, but I'm glad that I sang the silly song, because now I can always pull up the fruits of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. Music is a great thing, and it's also a great curse sometimes. But because there are other things that I can pull up that I learned in song, and I'm like, I haven't heard this in years. But anyways, that's not the point. The point here, as we stop chasing the squirrel, is simply that there are those things which we naturally crave. We crave everything that's not love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those things, there's no law against them, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's where you're supposed to go. But there are other things, and if you watch, like a 2-year-old, they're really good at showing you what the lust of the flesh looks like, right? I mean, she'll walk in the room, or he'll walk in the room, depending on which 2-year-old we're watching, and they will simply take what they want, right? They will simply tell you, I'm not going to eat that. I will eat, cheese for every meal. No, actually, you're not going to. But that's the natural of I'm the one who gets what I want. It's that I mentality. So everything that's not of the Spirit is of the flesh. Avoid that. Well, that's a pretty broad category. You have your work cut out for you just simply in that. So the lust of the flesh, not just simply pleasure seeking, but anything that is in opposition to the Spirit. Because what we're going to learn is that which is in opposition to the Spirit is actually anti-Christ. Is actually that thing that we spend so much time and so much energy trying to figure out how we're going to avoid when we realize, oh wait, that was me. Before you really love Jesus, you are against Christ, anti-Christ. That's the point that John is pushing further on down through here. But also, not only is there the lust of the flesh, the things that we naturally gravitate to in our non-saved and our depraved natures, but also there's the lust of the eyes. Now this, again, is not a junior high boy sermon. I don't have anything against junior high boys, just so we're clear. But I just keep hearing sermons that want to, because it's easier if we just put it over there and we say, yeah, y'all struggle with that, don't do that. And then I'm over here going, oh, but I really like my other things. So that's not where we want to go. The lust of the eyes, again, never mind, don't make the joke hard, let it go. Okay, good. Because if you're blind, you can still sin. That was a bad joke. I should have let it go. I knew it. Anyways, but in the course of things, what this is talking about is, what do you use your eyes for? You use your eyes to see. So the lust of the eyes are things we see. And we normally say, well, that's clearly when you look at a girl, then you look at the girl a second time. That's the lust of the eyes. No. The lust of the eyes is what you're taking in, and you look down and you go, wow, that guy's got a nicer car than I do. I'd really like to have that in my driveway. Or we begin to look and go, well, there is over there something that I would like. That guy has better books than I do, right? I just moved to Guy's library. Let me tell you, nothing has clued me in that I am really good at this particular way of looking at than moving a book. As a bibliophile, a lover of books, oh my goodness, I was in the mind of a genius. Okay, I probably could have gotten a lot more done if I hadn't stopped to read so many of his notes and so many of. I mean, the man would be writing in English, and then all of a sudden it'd be in Greek, and then it'd be in English again. Like it was, who does that? But anyways, as I'm looking at this guy's library, I realized I'm coveting your books, and then books about Jesus. You can't do that, Hartzell. Right now, I know some of you. You're going love book, whatever. I get it. Some of you have probably not looked at a book, and that's fine. But there are other things that we do take in, and we go, that's what I want. So again, this is that greed. This is that God is not enough. This is that I want something that I don't have. I think there might be a commandment about that. Maybe just one. But this is that notion, it's the longest one, oddly enough, of that I see things that are out here. I see things that the world has, and I go, that's what I want. It's not that my eyes are necessarily evil, but if the eye is bad, how much so everything else is bad, as Jesus says. But what I'm taking in and I'm looking at, and I'm, sometimes even as a Christian we'll do this. It's I could have more money, right? I mean, you could have more money, right? I could have more money. I would like to be able to, not stress so much at the front end of the month when, the chunk of my bills are due. I could do with more money. But do I want more money, or do I want more security? This is the thing. Do I trust God to provide for what I need? Well, yes. So why do I want more? Well, because provide more for me. It's not about learning to trust God at that point. It's about, no, that dollar's really important. So this is the lust of the eyes. I'm taking in things and I'm saying God's not enough. So I need God and I don't phrase it that way, because that's heresy and that's stupid. You don't do that. But we do it all the time. We find ourselves saying, man, I'd really like to have this. That would make my life complete. If I only had one more bedroom, my life would be complete. If I only had a car that the check engine light didn't come on, my life would be complete. If I only had a husband I don't need a husband. It's an illustration. I keep running into people, and I say it that way because normally it's the lady who is like, oh, if I just had a husband, my life would be complete. You have a husband if you're a Christian. His name is Jesus. And it works out well because he'll forgive you. And it's wonderful. But, at the same time, this is that I just need one more thing to make my life complete. I just need one more thing. Well, I'm sorry. I thought that, didn't Scripture say that Jesus makes you complete? Oh, that's right. Lust of the eyes. That's what this is getting at. See, it's much more broader than a junior high boy sermon. This is much more than don't struggle with lust. In this case, lust means desire. And that's, I desire those things which are natural to me. I desire to be in control. I desire for the world to be about me. Right? I know that that's something I probably shouldn't say out loud. But, I want it to be about me. Never mind. We're not going there. But there are those things in which the pride of life, the lust of the flesh. I want it to be just about me. I want it to be about those base natures that I just have. I am selfish by nature. I'm jealous by nature. I'm a jerk by nature. And those things are just simply there because they're a part of the natural man. But also, there are those opportunities where we begin to, with the lust of the eyes, we begin to look out, we take in, and this is what it would need to make my life complete. This is what I really need to be wonderfully and happy. But then there's also, on the last end of that, the pride of life. Now, the pride of life is its very distinct category. The other two, I think, they bleed in back and forth a little bit with each other. But the pride of life is where we stand and we go, look at all that I've accomplished. Look at how great I am. And I'm reminded of the line, and that's why it's come up a couple of times throughout the week for me, in watching the Three Amigos, where they're at the beginning and they're stealing their, ridiculous costumes. Like, you're going to go fight crime in that. But hey, I get it. If you've watched the movie, you know why they're stealing. But, Steve Martin's character is on the wall and he's making bird noises to get the other two's attention. And finally, he just gets so tired of it. He's like, look up here, look up here, look up here. Hey, hey, look up here. It's that moment. That is what the pride of life is. I've accomplished something. I've done something. Look at me. And we see this so often in our society. This is now not a sin in our society. It is. Just don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But this is what we applaud people for. Right? I mean, if you think about it, think about how many people in our society do we stand and clap when they stand up and say, I have accomplished, I have done, I'm awesome. And we go, oh, you are awesome. Write a book. I want to read it. Sorry, that's not connected to Sunday school. We were encouraging somebody to write a book. Just for the record, I want to be careful. Those are distinct. But I promise. Okay. But anyway, in the course of things, we hear people ad nauseum who toot their own horn. Not only are they blowing their own horn, but they are their own brass section. You would think that nobody had ever accomplished anything, but they tell you about how wonderful their children are. And I'm sure your children are wonderful. We drive around with the bumper stickers that are like, the entire bumper is nothing but my child's an honor roll student, my child's in Mensa, my child is, the greatest citizen, God himself high-fived my child. And we just have all of these bumper stickers. That last one might have been a bit too far, I apologize. Okay, that's great. I'm glad your child is smart and well-educated. We need more of that. But at the same time, is that what you're finding your contentment in? Or the guy who slaps his name on a building so that we don't forget who he is, and then reminds you, that's my name on the building. These are the things that we applaud when people start to tell us how grand they are. But here's the problem. In the economy of God, you're really not that great. You're really not that fantastic. You think about the greatest, most accomplished person that you know. Comparatively to God, they really don't matter. I don't care how fast Bolt is. And I know we're in the Winter Olympics. I should have gone with that instead of a Summer Olympic guy. But no matter how fast Usain Bolt thinks he is, he's really not that fast in compared to the God who created fast. The God who really can outrun the cheetah. The God who really can be everywhere at once. How do you race that? I don't care how fast you are. He's already there. He wins before you... Anyways, that analogies break down at some point. But here, that's the pride of life. When we begin to brag about what we have done, when we need to make sure everybody else knows that we have our ducks in a row and that they should come to our duck farm to see how it's done. Right? I could tell you all the time, I have a perfect family. And you might look over here and you might go, well, his wife, she's got a master's degree. She's uber smart. She's got it together. We were talking about that today, about how you're more educated than I am. It was great. And I waited until you were out of earshot when I did it, and now I just totally threw myself under the bus. Anyways. And I can tell you about how wonderful my children are. And you might buy it for a little while. Right? My children are actually wonderful. I don't think that they're horrible people. I think they're great. They're just little miniature people and with their own agendas and attitudes, and I love it, actually, sometimes. But in the course of things, I love you, buddy, you're great. But in the course of things, he just gave me the look like, get off it, Dad. So I'll get off it. But in the course of things, what is it that we're really bragging about? Because if I brag about my family, here's what I know. I'm married out of my league. My children are not the direct result of my genius parenting skills. Both of these things are a direct result of God going, I'm going to help you out. Okay? You're going to get this totally wrong. Let me help you out. Amen. And now, if you were to ask my wife will tell you the same thing. But she'll tell you the same thing. And she's convinced of the same. The reason we have a marriage that works is because God helps us make it work. God is the direct cause of why our marriage works. We have functioning children because God helps our children to be functioning. If we step away and I start telling you how grand my skills are, here, let me write a book for this because I know stuff, then you're gonna look back at me a few years and it's gonna be the same as I have the regard for Dr. Spock's book. Not from Star Trek, but there was a guy, the whole Don't Spank Your Children guy. I don't think you want to take parenting advice from him. Didn't turn out so well. But this is the way in which it works. The reason that these things are all sinful, the reason that is because they're opposed to God. They are against acknowledging how great He is. They are against acknowledging the sacrifice and the love that He has poured out on us by way of the cross and the empty tomb. These are things which start from us and build up because we know what our needs are. Right? This is the Garden of Eden all over again. Now, I don't really want to draw well, John just looked back and he wrote the 3 categories from there. But there is a reflection in that. Remember, Eve is hanging out. Satan slithers up. Hey, why don't you eat that? Oh, we can't do that. That's the one thing God says we can't do. So it's clearly not there are too many rules. Because there was one rule. Mm-hmm. One. And Eve is like, oh, no. And as the negotiation goes, which is really the first problem, as they negotiate about what sin is, good thing we don't do that now in our culture. But as they begin to negotiate, Eve starts looking at it and she goes, I am kind of hungry, actually. well, I could meet my need of hunger and it'd be okay. Because after all, I mean, it looks good. And we do this. We begin to think of, well, yes, God said not to cheat. But if I cheat, it looks good. And what's bad for your diet is even worse for your spiritual diet. Right? Brownies do not help you lose weight. Ice cream for breakfast, probably not a good start to the day. Spiritual adultery, really not a good start to the day. But this is, we begin to negotiate in the same way that Eve, and then finally Satan tips it over the line by, well, you know, it's really God just hiding the good stuff from you. You know, yeah, God puts the cookies on the top shelf because you're a short person and you can't reach it. You know, like, that's the, by short I meant short person, not short person, because I can't reach the top of my pantry. But that's an entirely separate discussion. I have a stool. And I can climb. Don't tell my children. But in the process of things, this is, just making sure you were listening. I know. But just in the process of things, this is not God keeping us from what is good. This is God keeping us for what is best and what is actually good. Because Eve says, oh, that'll make me wise like God? Okay, now you know what sin is. Congratulations. Now you're fully aware that you're in it. Now you're fully aware that that's who you are. How'd that turn out for you, Eve? Oh, not very well. How'd that turn out for you, Adam? Clearly not very well. But this is how that works. We begin to go, I want to meet my need my way. And that's ultimately what these three broad categories, and you can throw sin into any of these three, and we can debate about, well, does this sin go here or here? But the point is that these are all the ways in which we illegitimately choose to meet our needs. That we illegitimately choose to base our identity. This is those things which we go to and we say, it's about me, instead of going, it's about God. And as long as it's about us, we show that what we really love is us. Until we're willing to give up the things of us for the things of God, then we're not actually in love with God. Right? Because think about when you were dating your spouse, right? There was nothing that you wouldn't do to get to see them. Right? If you have a marriage that you're in love with your spouse, you will inconvenience yourself for your spouse. Right? Okay? You know, it is just the way in which love works. You do silly stuff. Right? You buy dead flowers. And you say, here. They don't look dead, but when you cut them, they're dead. You know, and we say, here's a token of my love. It's dead flowers. You know, give them a potted plant. It makes more sense. But anyways, or put a bush in the ground, then it'll grow for generations. Anyway, not a Valentine's sermon, right? But in the course of things, if I love God, then I will give myself over to the things of God. And I will sacrifice for that. But if what I love is me, then I'm going to make sure that it's convenient for me. And this is what John is saying is, watch the litmus test. If you find that you love the things that are against the things of God, it's a sign that you don't love God. But if you love the things of God, which you should because they're eternal, and you should because God is majestic and awesome and everything that you know Him to be, then you love God if you do the things of God. This is John's argument. This is what John is putting forth. When you love the things that are against God, they're going to get destroyed no matter how well you build them. Right? The pyramids used to be a lot grander than they are. And those are a monument of somebody's ego. I don't even know which pharaoh. I could look it up. I'm sure Google would tell me. But that's the point. You know, we argue over them. We argue over just which pharaoh ultimately ends up here. You know, these are the things that pass away. These are the things. We've forgotten entire civilizations. And that's normal because it's temporal. The things we see with our eyes, will be gone in 100 years. What is it that we're really putting ourselves into? Is it the things that are temporal and that pass away and that only serve to make us be able to pat ourselves on the back? Or are we putting ourselves into the things of God because we love God and because the things of God never pass away? If that's what we're doing, then it shows that we love God. Or we show that we don't love God. This is the dichotomy that John is giving us. Which side of the fence do we find ourselves on? John is writing to his listeners so that they would evaluate that question. Do I love God evidentially? Can I prove it? Can I look at my heart and go, yeah, I desire the things that I know I used to think were silly? Or do I still desire the same things I did before I met Christ? Because if I still am over here, and I don't even feel bad about the fact that I'm over here, then that's really good evidence that I'm over here, and I'm not with the Father. So that's the question that I want to leave us with. Can we look at ourselves and say for sure, yeah, I know that I love the Father because I love the things of the Father? Or are we still in that camp in which we go, I can clearly see I don't love the Father because I love all these other things that are opposed to Him? Where do we find ourselves? Because that's important. Father God, we thank you that you are the one who made a way